So we're going to look at the temperature of water at temperatures below 0 degrees Celsius, which means it's going to be a solid. Last week I put a beaker of about 500 milliliters water into the freezer. I had a thermometer in the water so that it would get frozen into that water. And that way I could take it out of the freezer and we could record the temperature as the ice warmed up and as it melted. So as you can see in the video, in the time lapse I have, the temperature at about 9:20 when I started it is around negative 18 degrees Celsius. That's actually a little bit warmer than what it was when I initially pulled it out of the freezer. It was about 20 degrees Celsius in the freezer. The temperature of the room is around 20 degrees Celsius. Temperature rises and falls a little bit, but it doesn't vary too much from 20 degrees Celsius. So the temperature in the room where the ice is melting is about the same no matter what. So as you can see, at about 9:45, we get the first signs of liquid water. That means that the temperature at the surface of that ice, where it's touching the beaker, is actually risen up and gotten to 0 degrees Celsius because that's the freezing point of water. The temperature inside of that solid, though, is still below 0 degrees Celsius. And if you pay close attention, it reaches around negative 0.3 degrees Celsius around 10 a.m. And this is when the temperature in there it stays relatively constant. So we've gotten the solid at around 10 a.m. So after about 40 minutes of warming up, if you wish, or energy being allowed to go into the solid, about 40 minutes for it to reach the point at which it can melt. And the melting process is probably going to occur faster on the outside because it's closer to the 20 degrees Celsius air. But at 12:45, so what is 9:20, 12 for 2, 3, about 3 hours and 20 minutes, 3 hours, 25 minutes later, we still are at 0 degrees Celsius with a significant chunk of ice in there. And that's because it's at its freezing point. The freezing point, it's at its melting point. The melting point is the temperature at which it melts. And although that temperature can be affected by other factors, for the most part, we take the melting and the freezing point of water to be 0 degrees Celsius. So the lowest temperature liquid water can have is 0 degrees Celsius, and the highest temperature solid water can have is 0 degrees Celsius. That 0 degrees Celsius is the temperature at which this transition between solid and liquid occurs. So if you have a liquid above 0 degrees Celsius and you lower it to 0 degrees Celsius, once it reaches that 0 degrees Celsius mark, if you have a continual energy change of removing energy from that, you can cause that liquid to freeze. And during that freezing process, it will stay at 0 degrees Celsius until it turns all into a solid. And vice versa. As you see here, we've started off at well below 0 degrees Celsius. We raised the temperature of that ice up to 0, at which point it started to melt and continues to melt with the temperature remaining at 0 degrees Celsius until all of that liquid water, or all of it, will turn into liquid water, at which point we can continue to raise the temperature then. But at 0 degrees Celsius, no matter which direction you're going, the temperature will remain constant until that change has occurred completely.